Okay, ladies and gents, let's get started. Are you all back in the room, ready for the best part of the day, the Q&A? And there are a lot of questions. I can promise you that there are a lot of questions, which is excellent. Okay, so please, in the chat box, let me know that you are back. Let me know that you are back. And we should have the whole team with us. The Michael Bowens of the world, Leon Castleman, Bruno, Shillyboy, myself. There are a lot of questions. And in fact, what I'm going to do is probably ask Leon first and Michael Bowen first. There's a lot for Bruno and Shillyboy, like there always are. So let's wait for them to all join us. Okay. Let's just give it a few seconds, guys. Okay, Clifford's back, Kerry's back, Carlton looking forward to Q&A, Justine, Sivositu. Okay, so let me get my questions up. Thank you very much. Leon, question for you. Leon, if somebody wants to take a property deal from the brokerage, they can get a bond because they are working, but they lack cash. They don't got any capital, but they can actually apply for a bond. Can they still come to the brokerage for a deal?
Absolutely, Andrew. That is the second biggest problem that we help investors with at the brokerage, is to find capital to actually help them to complement their bond affordability. And yes, they are welcome to approach us at any stage. And we can most definitely help most of investors with access to capital and connect them with angel investors.
And at the moment, is there an actual platform where investors can view deals, or do they just need to email you?
At the moment, we haven't got a full-on platform yet, something that is in the pipeline we're busy working on. But for now, just email us, and if you can connect with us on www.joinsapin.com/BSB, and on there you'll see the options on which you can connect with us. If you like it you saw today, you can also just pop us a mail at info@brunosamarproperty.co.za.
Excellent. And Makati was asking you, in terms, I guess from your blueprints earlier, right, when you're looking at an area, the growth of an area, and perhaps looking at, is there going to be further growth in that area? Should they look at a TPN report or a Lightstone report?
Andrew, and I think Michael Bowen also illustrated it very nicely. We use both. I always use both. I look at both of them. They give you different, the same information with different perspectives. And that gives you a true picture of what potentially might be going on in the space. My go-to model is primarily the Lightstone report. I like that one personally, and I depend on that a lot. But TPN does complement that with its own unique flavors, especially around the demographics in the area and the movements and changes that are going on in the area.
Excellent. Okay, great. What else is here? I think that's it for now, Leon, for 2 seconds. Thank you very much. A question here, Makati saying, at SAPIN, yes, we have partnered with Absa Bank. What about the other banks? So, good question. Even when you speak to Miguel from Home Loans, as investors, myself and Leon and Shillyboy and Bruno and all of us that invest in property, we always look for the best deal. What you'll find is that Absa Bank are very aggressive. Absa Standard Bank are the most aggressive banks at the moment when it comes to lending on home loans at the moment. And as investors, we should never choose one bank over any other bank. I like Absa Bank because of the future rental product. I like Absa Bank because they have an attitude of wanting to work with property investors. But as investors, we go where we get the best deal, hands down. Okay. So let's start talking to, is another question here perhaps? I think this is just from Makati, Leon, just saying I've got a primary residential home in my own name, just registered in a company, pre-qualified with Christian. I am now looking for a deal. So perhaps reach out to Leon and Makati, and he'll certainly sort you out. Now, the majority of these questions are for Bruno, Shillyboy. There's questions like, what is deemed as a donation by SARS, explain Section 36. There was one at the bottom about what happens when you buy property with a friend and he dies. What are the common reasons someone would buy in a PTY and trust, own shares and buying and trading in a trust only? Is the first time mentioned structure for more tax efficiency? Does a trust pay the same tax irrespective of its profits? So look, Bruno and Shillyboy, there's quite a lot of questions. Are there any specific questions that you want to take? Some of the questions are very similar, or do you want me to pick some questions for you, or are there some key ones there that you want to touch on quickly?
So maybe pick some questions for us. I did send through a couple that we can address for now, but you are right, there's a lot of similarities. So I think if we elaborate a little bit, we might actually be able to encompass 2 or 3.
So I think let's talk about Lungalwa's question about Section 36. Can we explain what section? And is that Section 36, or is that meant to be Section 13.6? Maybe.
I think so.
Shillyboy, you muted, I think.
Me. There we go. Thank you. You're kind. I think they were referring to Section 13.6 because that's what we touched on. So basically, in a nutshell, principle says that there is allowed deduction for a property investor, provided that you meet specific requirements, right? So like I said earlier, the requirements will be that this being the basics before we go into the technicality, that you need to be owning 5 residential units, which means any new and unused residential unit thereafter, you will be allowed a deduction under that.
Excellent. Now, just very quickly, I'm going to ask Michael Bowen to step away from the camera and just stand. I want to see his outfit. Are you going to party now? Come, everyone, make him stand. I want to see what you're wearing.
Oh, wow. Are you sure?
You're going to jiggle.
I did not know I was going to be called back in again. We're headed to our friend's party. We had to dress a little bit funky. So I hope I can entertain everybody with my...
Absolutely. Sorry, Mike, I had to put you in the spot. I love doing that. So, Edgar wants to know, he loved those zoning maps. It makes so much sense, Mike. Where can everyone get their hands on these zoning maps?
Okay, cool. I'm not going to give everyone the address, but I'm going to give someone even better information. Go to Google, type in your city, and type in GIS maps. The other thing you can... Yeah, so global information systems. Every major city has them. Unfortunately, South Africa hasn't consolidated them just yet, but GIS spatial maps or GIS zoning maps, and you'll be able to find them for your city. And the other one you can search for as well, which I don't particularly like, is the cadastral maps, but they're not as great as the zoning maps. I much prefer those ones to get a bit of information.
Excellent, absolutely. Mike, I did answer a couple of questions for you just before you came back on. I know that you got some time constraints, so if you want to go, all the best, my man. I know you have to go out there and party in town.
I've got about 8 minutes, so if there's any more questions, ask away.
Yeah, and then what I did was I took most of them, all the basic ones in the beginning, and the rest of them are pretty much for Shillyboy and Bruno. They're all around trust and tax for now, hey?
Oh, there's a lot of boring people in today asking a lot of boring questions.
I know.
I mean, those guys can't even dress up properly. They've got boring ties on. They don't have any suspenders on.
That's it. For somehow they make tax seem fun, eh?
I've got to say, if you want to spend some time with Shillyboy, he's on people on this call. He's a great guy. Literally, he's a very lively, most exciting tax person I've ever met. And the same goes on Bruno's side. For a lawyer, he's actually pretty cool.
Wow. Thanks for compliment, Mike. You're so kind.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool. I'm going to jump off. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Cool.
Cheers, Mike.
Okay, so there's quite a few questions. Let's talk about tax rebates by Charlton, line 15. Do we only get the tax and VAT portion back on expenses? There's no context there. Shillyboy, I don't know if you can get context from what you were saying before.
Yeah, I'm struggling to get a context, but I think let's maybe clarify something around that VAT issue, is that when you are in a residential market and you are renting out properties, you'll typically not be relevant for VAT purposes because you're not charging VAT. We know that rental incomes for residential property are what we call not taxable supplies for VAT purposes, which means you wouldn't be having registered for VAT, and then as a result, you won't be claiming VAT on your expenses. So it's not relevant for residential property at this stage.
Okay, cool.
Just on that, what is very interesting but problematic is on Airbnbs. The VAT, the requirement for you to register as a VAT vendor, because Airbnbs, although you're doing residential properties, in terms of the VAT Act, aren't typically considered to be purely residential. They're actually commercial because of the business.
Cool. Thank you for that. Shillyboy, around asset for share transfers, Charlton's asking if you can explain the concept of asset for shares transfer.
Look, I mean, in the interest of time, I'll just explain, because it can get very detailed and more technical. So in the interest of time, basically what we're trying to say is that when you own any form of asset, right, you can take that asset and then transfer it into a company in exchange of owning shares in that particular company. So that's basically what he says. So what we found is that the benefits with that is that it does what you call rollover, which means the applicable taxes are then rolled over, and then the company substitute the original owner of that particular asset. So that's the principle behind asset for share transfer.
Okay, cool. Colin's saying, what happens when a founder of a trust passes away but trustees are still there?
So remember, so a trust exists in perpetuity. That effectively means that it exists outside of the founder. So once the trust is created, it's run by the trustee and can carry on over generations. So as a trustee, the trustee would typically explain how you're going to replace trustees. So if you pass away, a new one would be appointed. Some trustees may dissolve the trust, but it's all in that document. So that's how it would be governed.
Wakati says, do we need to appoint someone to do the administration of the trust?
The master, due to certain abuses, the master of the High Court requires that all family business trusts have an independent trustee. And that's a person basically that's accountable to make decisions on behalf of the beneficiaries, that's impartial. And with that, there is a requirement typically that there's proper record keeping, a level of accounting, an asset register. So there are certain compliance requirements. So yes, you would need someone to assist in the admin.
Is that something that you guys do?
Yes, it is part of the administration service.
Okay, cool. Line 13, at Tully, I owned properties in my own name. My husband then owned properties in his name, and the rest were owned in a trust. Sadly, we lost it all during the recession of 2008. My question is, I thought that the properties in a trust is protected from creditors, but in this case, it was also attached. So, if you guys can explain that?
So remember, they are protected from creditors, but at the end of the day, what happens is, so if you buy the property in the trust or in a company, that company is going to become the borrower, is going to sign a contract of loan with the bank, and the property itself is going to stand as security for the loan. So if that company or trust is unable to pay the debt, the bank that gave the loan would still come and try and attach the property. And that's how it would happen. And remember, same thing happens when you sign as a surety. Even though your property might be in a company or a trust, as a surety, the bank can still come after you. So it's protected from other creditors, that aren't the bank, but the bank has security over the property.
Excellent, thank you. Clifford, line on thing number 3. Let me check here, line number 3. I have refinanced a property last year that I bought 5 years ago, which is in my personal name. Now I want to transfer the property to my company to free up my personal affordability. Is it possible to move this property to the PTY and move bonds from my name?
Shillyboy, do you want to take that one? Do you want me to take it?
Mute myself. I think I can just touch it briefly, and then you can also go, because it's more a bit of financing rather than tax and legal. And it boils back to what we're doing, what we're talking about, the guys who have properties in their personal name and you want to move them. In this case, he wants to free himself for affordability, which is very important if you want to grow in the property space. So he can move that bond and the property into the company, because the banks, what they do, they don't do substitution of data. So they'll want him to actually do bond cancellation in his personal name and then reapply into the company.
Yeah, that's 100%. At some point, the bank is going to need to be paid. So you would need to be able to raise that money, and you do that with another bond. Exactly that.
Cool. Question here from Colin, line 10. I have a trust, and I'm assuming, so I have a trust that holds my residential property. Can I use that, I'm assuming, can I use that residential property for investment property? So I'm thinking what the question is, could I move out and rent it out and use it for investment purposes, i.e. my residential home? Or could I perhaps live in my residential home and rent rooms out, or use it for Airbnb? So yeah, I think that's the question.
Okay, if I may jump in there, I think that's a tricky one, because you can do that. I mean, I think that's a decision you and Andrew can take as a property coach for him. You guys make that decision. If it's profitable, you can do that. But one thing that you also need to be careful of is that now that property, from tax point of view, it potentially going to cease to be a primary residence. So which means that going forward, that capital, what you call capital, primary residence capital exclusion of about 2 million currently, you will have to apportion the capital gain before you actually apply that 2 million. You sell that particular property in future. So you just need to be careful. And this is why I encourage people to say, listen, if you are making a decision to say, this primary residence that I was staying in, I don't want it to be anymore a primary residence. I want to do Airbnb. I want to do a multi-let. Then rather dispose that property into an investment structure so that you can actually be eligible to the whole exclusion of the capital gain, instead of now later on having to come and apportion it to the years of having used it as an investment property versus the years that you have actually held it as a primary resident. You might find yourself disadvantaged in that position.
Cool, thank you so much. Question by Charlton, and then we'll go down to question 28, Shillyboy, which you can answer for me, which is what is deemed a donation by SARS, but we'll come back to that. Colin is saying, or Charlton is saying, line 11, if I were to take a re-advance on one of my properties, I can obviously use the funds for personal use. Please advise, is there any tax implications when I pay the funds to my personal account and use it for my lifestyle? Purchasing a vehicle, taking my partner out, going on holiday, taking Andrew out for a free holiday.
Yeah, I like it.
I like it as well. What's your answer there?
Look, if I may ask, is that property investment property in the structure separately, or is this property in his personal name? What's the story there?
So let's just check Vimeo in the chat box. So Charlton, if you're still there, this property you're referring to is the house you live in, is the buy to let. While Charlton's doing that, Shillyboy, let's answer the donations question.
What is the deemed donation?
Yeah.
Okay, I think in this context of our presentation, there might be related to when we said that if you send the money to, if you give the loan to a trust, right, and you don't charge any form of interest, the interest savings, which means is what you should have actually charged as an interest under official rate versus what you didn't charge, which in this case will be 0, right? Then that difference, that interest saving, is what we call deemed donation in the eyes of SARS. So then you will be subject to donation tax in that amount.
Excellent. Coming back to Charlton's question, Shillyboy, he's saying it was in an investment property. So if he's got an investment property, just say a buy-to-let or multi-let, and he's got R1 million in there and he wants to take it out of his investment property, what are the tax implications if he uses it personally?
Okay, I think he didn't really answer the question. Okay, but it's fine. What I'll do, I'll give him the 2 scenarios. That's fine. So let's put it this way. The money that he gets from the bank as further having refinanced the property is not taxable because he has an obligation to pay back. So basically, he received money which has conditions attached to it. Hence, that's the reason why you normally don't pay tax on that kind of money. So he can use it for whatever he wants if the property is in his personal name. Let's park that. Now, if this property, he did a further financing, which is where it's tricky. If he did a further financing and this property is in a separate investment structure, which there's no relationship between himself and the thing, but because he's a director, he has an access to those funds, right? Once he withdraw the money from that investment structure, then he will trigger what? Dividends. Then, which is where with dividend withholding tax kicks in.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Shillyboy. Bruno.
Yes.
936, anger. What happens when you buy a property with a friend and he dies? So I'm assuming, anger, you're talking about you go find somebody in the network or it's a personal friend of yours and you set up a JV, you set up maybe a PTY company, you get a joint venture agreements in place, and then your friend or partner, passes away. What happens there, Bruno? Or how do you
So I suppose the unfortunate thing behind the question is the scenario that you placed is an easy scenario to answer versus the scenario that I worry about the way that the question is framed. So I bought a property with a friend. Now, what happens is a lot of people just buy properties together, and in the title deed, they've got both names there. And they do or say nothing about it. They're just joint owners. And in that instance, you're basically an owner of a half share, undivided half share of this property. So you can't draw a line down the middle. You can't do anything. You're just half of this property. It's not tangible enough. And you can go out and try and sell it, but no one's going to buy a half share of a property because they can't pick a room and use that room. And the problem with this scenario is that basically a partnership comes into existence, even though there's nothing in writing. And the terms of this partnership are very difficult to express because we don't actually understand what the nature of the investment was. So we've seen a lot of scenarios like this that go sour especially when partners start fighting with each other and one wants to exit, but the other one doesn't want to sell the property. And this does land up, for instance, having to go to court and try and express what the wishes were. Now, if somebody passes away, more often than not, you'll find that the estate would actually want to dispose of this of the property so they can get some liquidity in. So very likely you might have the opportunity here of actually buying the property. So my suggestion from a pragmatic perspective is make the offer. And try get the other half share back into your name if you do want to keep it, so that you don't have to share the property with anyone else. Andrew's scenario is the easiest scenario because if you did go buy a property with someone, but you actually created a company and you did it within a company, you'll normally find that the company should have regulated how you guys are going to deal with the property, how decisions are going to be made, what happens if you want to sell. And if you and your partner can't come up with a resolution, you can actually apply to dissolve this company, to liquidate it, and the property would be sold and the shareholders paid out.
Excellent. And tell me, just include Miguel and Bruno, what's your general feeling on sheriff auctions? Johan was asking.
Okay, sheriff, yeah. So sheriff auctions aren't for the faint-hearted. It is a different world, but it is something that you can get used to. Each sheriff auction has its own regulars, its own people, its own vibe. It definitely don't. So what I found with sheriff auctions is don't go to Sheriff HQ, find a property, pin your hopes in it, and walk into the auction trying to buy it. That's probably the worst thing you can do, because there's other people out there. First of all, there's a 50% chance the property doesn't even go on auction because of a last minute repayment. Even if the property does go on auction, there's a lot of guys out there, and some prices are pushed up. You'll end up overpaying. So my suggestion with auctions is you need to get to know them. Sometimes you even need to know the people there. Get used to it. Go to at least 5, 6 auctions. Sit, listen, watch before you do anything. And as Andrew normally advises, don't get caught in the emotion of it. Pick a price, stick to that price. If you don't get the property this week, in 2 weeks' time, there'll be other properties. Don't get carried away. I've seen a lot of entry-level investors go into auctions. They get stuck with one bad property and they get burned. And then I don't see them again, and it's quite sad. Like, it's still investment. Like, you know, think about it, do the maths, and then just get used to it.
Exactly. Question from Kerry was part of Michael's presentation talking about property accountants, general accounting for property investors. Is that something which Intergen can also help with?
Am I still muted?
No, you're good.
No, yeah, I'm good. Thank you. So, yeah, we do. Intergen does that. And what we found actually attest to that is that we found that property being a bit niche and complicated sector, you will ideally want someone who's more focused in the sector. And also, on top of that, you being a property investor and having listened to Shillyboy and now having a structure, you want someone who understands an accounting that has to come around trust, because a trust accounting is a bit more niche and a sort of a specialized area. So you don't want to be having an accountant that is more general. You might not end up actually doing an inefficient trust administration. So yes, to answer your question, we've got a head of accounting, is Lizelle. She specializes in trust accounting and, of course, property sector, having been under Intergen.
Excellent. And on that same question, Carol is saying, so with your financial statements of a trust, do you pay the accountant monthly or once a year?
Okay, I think in the interest of what we found within Intergen is we developed a model that is more easy and more affordable for property investors, where it's much easier if they pay on a monthly and a retainer. Then it becomes a more discounted model. But if you want to come then and pay once a year when you're looking for financial statements, you tend to pay a little bit more because you're not on a retainer. So this is in the interest and having understanding of property investor. Then that's why we came up with the model where everything is streamlined. So I would recommend that if they were to join in Intergen for that matter, rather consider retainer model.
And what we need to remember with that as well is just going in and paying for financial statements. That's not the actual monthly operating accounting is something that needs to be looked at, because if you have a trust and nothing's happening in the trust versus you actually having a trust and pursuing your investment journey, there's going to be constant movements. And this is the type of thing that if you try to do it once a year, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because try catch up 1 year ago what happened in your life and accounting wise. You need to go back. You need to go back into your records, find invoices, find this, find that. The nice thing with the monthly retainer is you have someone that's consistently keeping your books up to date, and like this, you're up. By the time you get to year end, you're okay.
I think if I may come in there, Bruno, on that, Andrew, if I may be allowed. The trust as being what we call provisional taxpayer, right? So automatically, even if the trust, there might not be any form of movement, you are required by law to actually submit provisional tax returns. So if you're one of those, then comes and wait at the end of the year to say, I'm going to visit accountants at the end, you might find yourself having penalties because you would have missed on those provisional tax returns.
And tell me, is it possible to change independent trustee?
Yes, it is. An independent trustee is selected by the trust. So this is quite an interesting, something quite interesting. The other trustees can't simply want to kick out an independent trustee because the independent trustee put his foot down and had to make a decision that was unpopular, because that is actually the job of the independent trustee. So you can change independent trustees. An independent trustee can resign and somebody else can be appointed. But if it's about a dispute specifically, you can't just want to fire someone. The independent trustee would probably have to stand up, refer this to the master's office, and the master's office would need to basically deal with that situation. You can then resign as independent trustee, but at least you've notified the master why there was a dispute to begin with.
And Bruno, I think we had this conversation this week about angel investors borrowing money, NCA charging interest. So Angel was just saying, do all angel investors need to register with NCA when they charge interest? And if so, what is the process to register?
Sure. Look, so the registration process isn't particularly difficult. There's a bit of a charge. There's a whole bunch of information that you need to supply and certain knowledge that you need to have. So it's not necessarily a difficult process, but it takes time, and the amount of information that you need to understand. Your agreements need to comply with the National Credit Act, so they need to be properly drafted. So there's certain costs behind that you need to look into. So if you're going to be doing it on a regular basis, sure, then it's a good investment. If you're only going to be doing it once off, be careful, because the interest rate that you're getting back needs to now cover these costs that you're going to be accruing. How do you stay outside the ambit of the National Credit Act? Typically, if you're doing a loan to an entity, so a company, with an asset value or annual turnover of over R1 million, the transaction is exempt from the National Credit Act. Reason being that if it's a company with that much money, one would typically find that it's sophisticated and should be able to control its finances, and the National Credit Act need not be there to protect it. Another way of avoiding the National Credit Act is if a loan is made to a company and the loan is above 250,000 Rand, because that's also, you're looking now around the sophisticated model where the company should be able to run a business and taking out 250,000 Rand. Those are the two best examples of getting out of the NCA. If you're stuck in the NCA and your borrower, for example, is a person, then unfortunately you would need to register, or you could look for a company that is already registered, and sometimes they've got deals where you lend the money to the company and the company lends the money to the investor, and there's a specific charge that the company levies for this.
Awesome, thank you, Bruno. There's still a few questions for you guys. There's loads of questions on there, as you can see. There's a couple here for Leon, so I just want to get Leon back on. Hello, Leon, back in town.
Hello, Drew. Hello, guys.
So one of these questions is around sourcing fees, and what are you seeing? How do you know what the right sourcing fee to pay is, and what is the brokerage charge? But let's also have a conversation around, is it a thumb suck, is it a percentage? What can one expect to pay for sourcing fees?
That's an interesting question, and the answer is quite varied depending on what aspects of the property market you look at. So if you look at a traditional estate agent as an example, right, that might go and help you find a house, they could charge anything up to 10% plus VAT on top of that, and even more if they go and hunt us down a specific property for you in the upper luxury market and so on, right? Etc. So it can get very pricey. In the brokerage, because we're serving investors, we use pretty realistic and affordable numbers. We go at a 5% rate. At this stage is our current model. It does vary a bit depending on the size of the deal. If it's a very small deal to make it, to justify the overheads that is there, then it might be a slightly more from a percentage perspective, and then potentially slightly less. We are a little bit negotiable on that depending on the scenario. For capital raising, if we help you with funding on that side, we charge a 4% at the moment. But again, that varies depending on the size and the amounts, etc. on that. So that's the brokerage amounts. They compare very, very, very favorable to dealing with an estate agent or any of the other more traditional channels, or paying a 10% as an example at an auction, including VAT.
Okay, cool. And Leon, tell me, I've got a question here for you from Maxon. So you obviously dealt with the estate agents, right? And Maxon's saying the agents would tell you the sellers are refusing to negotiate below market value. How do you deal with those type of situations?
Yeah, it's always tricky when you're dealing with a seller through the agent and you don't have direct access to the seller. Then it always becomes whatever the agent says must be the truth, right? So the reality is that many homeowners are guided by estate agents about what the selling price should be, and they try and stick to that. So better if you can get face-to-face with the seller and have a conversation about that. That's the one thing. The second thing is that we use tool sets in the brokerage when we try and secure deals, right? If we can't get directly to the seller, we try and always work with the estate agents, and we work on facts. So we use our toolkits, we use the Lightstone reports, the actual sales prices. If we feel that the property is overpriced, then that's a great tool to use and actually point out that you're not just a buyer from the street that doesn't know anything and is prepared to pay any price. You know your market, and you understand what a market-related price is. The other one is also the equity in the deal, as we always talk about. So if there's a motivated seller, he must have some reason for selling, and the more motivated he is, the more likely he is to be negotiable. If he's got equity in his house, that makes the situation even a bit more flexible. And if you tick both the boxes of a motivated seller and equity in the deal, that is the sweet spot where you have the best chance of getting away with making an offer and creating a win-win. Then there are scenarios where if the house is distressed, we can use that with the evidence that we gather during our due diligence to present a portfolio of evidence to the agent and the seller that motivates why our offer is lower than market rates. And we've done that very successfully. Andrew, you were aware of the deceased estate in Edenville, right? Where we picked up that house eventually for just over for 450,000 Rand, right? When originally they wanted close to $1 million for it. But the condition of the house was bad. And we provided that body of evidence and used that as a negotiation tool. And sometimes Mauricio's reports from a building inspector can also support you strongly in having the edge in negotiations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leon. Okay, next. Well, line 23, Shillyboy. Tammy, the question on Shillyboy, how does this concept differ from STC, the conjure principle versus the company declaring the dividends and paying STC? So try and get context there. I'm just going to answer Tammy's first question around preferential. What rate does preferential charge to manage the property? Or they just sell you the actual software? No. So remember, there's a big difference here between full management, a company that does everything A to Z and you just don't get involved. Preferential set up for the property entrepreneur who still wants to have some kind of control, be it you want to do the viewing with your tenants and you want to maybe do your own inspections and you use tech to support that. The rates are around 4.5%, but they do vary depending on the features and depending on the quality of the tenant you get into the property. And that's what Ross wants to talk to you about tomorrow. So Tammy, make sure you are here to meet Ross and to go through Preferential and how they work. Somebody was asking a question around, in the recordings, remember the 2 different ticket prices for this weekend? Yes, if you did pay the 1,500, the higher ticket price, you do get this Q&A section as well, which is great. Before I come back to Shillyboy for that question, were there any other easy ones here? So make sure I get through all of these, eh? Bruno, I'll come to you about Tali's question. How do I get a hold of a list of people that are liquidated or sequestrated before an auction? But I think Shillyboy, line 23, tell me, Shillyboy, how does this concept differ with STC, the conduit principle versus the company declaring the dividends and paying STC?
I thought the fair questions will be given to you, Andrew and Bruno. But to answer your question, the conduit principle, as I explained, is a common law principle that is being codified in the Income Tax Act, and it's only applicable to trust. So it wouldn't be relevant. I think that's a different sort of a difference between that already. So it's only applicable to trust. So you can't use it in a company. That's number one. And to explain what is it, is basically saying that what goes into the trust, if it goes out in the same year, then only the beneficiary gets taxed, not the trust. So what he's mentioning here, it's the old terminology. We used to call it a secondary tax on companies. I think I was still in high school or something. So now what we're having is what is dividend withholding tax, because in the reason being that the nature on how the tax is getting deducted from dividends is different than the old method. So now what is happening is that when a company declares dividends, obviously they'll withdraw what we call dividend withholding tax. So you basically, the money that you get, is the company that is paying that dividend is already being paid. So that's pretty much the difference between it. So they don't really link to each other.
Okay, cool. And another question from Tammy, just before I come back to Bruno. What happens when someone makes you a trustee, right? And this trustee has the power of attorney now to do as he or she wants, bypassing the other trustees. Is this the alter ego trust, and what impact it has to trustees?
Do you want me to answer this, Shillyboy?
Yeah, sure. You can go ahead.
So with most trust practices, something like this is actually not allowed. You'll see that most trust deeds won't allow for something like this to actually take place. So first of all, it goes against the general policy of the Master of the High Court that requires that all the trustees make decisions when it comes to the trusts. Certain important transactions, especially property transactions, you'll find won't be allowed, because even if you do give the other trustees authority to sign on your behalf, you still need to have a meeting. All the trustees need to concur on the decision, and then you're only giving signing rights to somebody else. You're not letting somebody else bypass the other trustees. Then on top of that, you've got the master that came in with requiring an independent trustee on all trusts, on all family business trusts. And an independent trustee would never allow this to happen. We would never give up our rights to somebody else, because then we could be held responsible if something goes wrong. And so it's very, very seldom that you'd see a situation like this actually take place. And if it is taking place, I'd be very careful. It shouldn't be allowed.
Okay, Bruno?
Yeah. I'm here.
So I never got the end of that. I'm trying to determine if it's my internet or your internet. Did everyone hear Bruno? Maybe in the chat box, we know. Okay, Nick is saying it's my internet, not yours. Don't worry. It's my internet, apparently. Let me check it over here. Okay, so that's fine. As long as everyone heard you, that's good. Can you all hear me okay? In that chat box, just say yes or no.
We can hear you.
So Bruno, while your internet's good, are you able?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, don't worry. You can ask the question.
Are you able to answer line 48?
I will check.
Line 48. How do I get hold of a list of people that are liquidated and sequestrated before an auction?
Okay, great. So that's a brilliant question. Liquidations. Okay, so liquidations relate to companies, sequestration relate to people. So that's the first distinction that a person needs to make. Then not everyone that's liquidated, not everyone that's sequestrated has assets to be put up on auction. So you now need to be careful what data you're actually trying to sift through. Because if you want to get a list of everyone being sequestrated, buy the Government Gazette every week. The Green Gazette on the internet will give you access to this. There's special section regarding sequestrations, and you can start from top to bottom. All the person's information is there. But there's a lot of data, and you're going to waste a lot of time. Because when that data is introduced, it doesn't necessarily mean these people have anything to sell. Another juncture is when there's an appointment of a liquidator or a trustee to take care of the person's estate. But again, this does not guarantee that these people have any assets. And it's still going to take a while before it goes up on auction. So unfortunately, there's no good answer. There's no list because these properties only go up on auction. So unless you've got the time and the capacity to deal with this amount of data, you could get the list of appointments easily from the master or from a Green Gazette, and you could phone each and every trustee and ask them, hey, on all of these, who has properties and who wants to sell them. But the easiest solution would be maybe just call up all the trustees and liquidators in a specific area. Ask them that you want to build this relationship and that you're wanting to buy properties and that you put in offers if they were willing to accept. And that's a more direct way of actually finding the list of people. Just go directly to them and ask them to call you when they've got something.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think looking at the questions, Putty, to answer your question is yes. When it comes to running numbers, there are spreadsheets. Putty, are you on the fundamental course? Do you have the support there? Dave will be running through the numbers section tomorrow. Make sure you do listen in. But Leon and Shillyboy and Bruno, thank you so much for your time. Can you all just please say a massive thank you to the team? In the chat box, everyone, just say thank you there for me. Thank you, Shillyboy.
Thanks, Drew.
You, Bruno. Thank you, Leon.
Thank you, guys. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for putting this all together, Drew. It's a job very well done.
Especially on your anniversary, Drew. Well done.
Yeah. Now go celebrate.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just forgot about the anniversary, just a little bit. I'll make you enough bright tonight. She'll be happy.
Nice, good job.
Yeah, off the cuff. Awesome, guys. I think my internet is quite bad now, but we are coming towards the end, which is good. So I'll actually start wrapping up for the day. What I want to know from all of you, there's been a lot. I mean, there were loads of questions. There were more questions than what I thought. Just let me know right now, what's one thing you've learned? Put it in the chat box for me. What's just one thing? What's one big thing? They're like, that was amazing, or this was cool, or what was one reason why today was worth it? Just pop it into that chat box for me. What was it? Yeah, pop the question in there. What's one thing? Kerry, I really loved the Leon session. Charlton, tax advice. Fantastic. What else do we have there? Justine and Tammy. Cornay, Shloni, Dexter, Lesedi, Renita, Atali, Khomotso. What's one thing that you really enjoyed out of today? What made it worth it for you? Investment structures, legal structures, the brokerage team, excellent. Claudia, join SAPIN /BSP. Taking action is key, absolutely. Just remember, For those of you that really want to get going, or you're not quite sure what the next step is of how SAPIN and TPA can assist you, speak to Alani and Daniel. I'll say that 100 times. Okay, thank you very much. Now, remember, and I'm going to ask my team to let me know who has been the most active today, because tomorrow morning, not only, well, tomorrow afternoon, yes, we will be giving the cash flow game away tomorrow afternoon. For the most active person, I'm going to ask my team to choose someone from today that they feel has been the biggest team play. Answer questions always on there. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you a free Property Academy mug. Now, this thing is worth millions. You want to make sure you drink your tea and coffee out of this mug. Okay, so tomorrow morning, we're going to let you know who won the mug. Come on, who wants to win the mug? Every single one of you want to drink coffee out of this Property Academy mug, still in its wrapper, brand new. This is better than the game. You can use it every day. Okay, so coming towards the end. This is what the agenda does tomorrow morning. Guest speaker coming in. I'll do a recap first thing in the morning. Get you for 10 to 9. We're speaking about point number 6 in the signature solution. Leonora Swart, Robin Booth. There's a question tonight about refining systems. Robin Booth is doing it tomorrow. Dave's got the master class. Ross Fitzgerald is doing deal management. Then there's another Q&A, all different type of questions. Massive value. And then we'll do the free giveaway tomorrow afternoon. Now, I know Alani and Daniel are still around. If you need to speak to them, click on the link. If you're having any troubles booking an appointment with them, or you can't get a hold of them, in the chat box, let us know. Let us know now, and just say, need to speak to Daniel, or I need to speak to Alani. Do that now in the just in case you were struggling to speak to them today for whatever reason. Okay, some of you may want to go for the coaching. Some of you may want to go for one of the 2 different off the convention offers that I did offer you today. That's completely up to you. All righty. So I'm going to ask my team, Dave, Nico, and Ati, in our internal chat box, is there anything else you would like me to announce? Because it's almost bang on time. We did say it's going to finish 4:30. It's 4:36. I hope you all had an awesome day. Team is saying good. Everything's fantastic. So, ladies and gents, from my side, go have an awesome evening. I'm going to go enjoy my wedding anniversary with my wife, Mr. Romantic over here. I see Michelle Swart. Thank you very much for posting the link on Facebook. I've got some brownie points there. Thank you very much for having my back, Michelle. And the rest of you, see you all tomorrow morning sharp. Thank you very much.